This video is brought to you by the Jimmy Lewis Off-Road Riding School. Be sure to check out the Learn to Ride online course at jimmylewisoffroad.com.
Hi, I'm Mattoon.
I'm Logan Tyler.
And today we're going to give you our quick impression on the 2023 KTM Freeride EXC. So when you first hop on this bike, it kind of throws you for a loop because it is an electric bike, right? It features a brushless motor, and how it delivers power depends on what power mode you're in. Now, there's three modes. Mode 1, which KTM calls its Ergonomics mode. Mode 2, which is where it starts to pick up a little bit more. And Mode 3 is its most aggressive map. Now, when we're actually riding this thing in Mode 1, I would say it's not necessarily meant for someone like us, for the power delivery. It's great for beginners though, right?
It's really good.
Mm-hmm. It's capped at about 35 miles an hour. It does take a while for it to kind of get up to speed. And it's a really, really mellow power delivery, which as someone who teaches beginner riders, it's a perfect power delivery that I would want them on. So that way when they hop on the bike, they're not so scared to twist the throttle. Now, Mode 2, this is where the bike starts to pick up. I believe the speed limit, this is where the speed is now capped at 50 miles per hour. And it starts to pull a little bit more aggressively, but it's still really smooth. And I'd say the power band is linear. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it's real smooth and always pulling.
Mm-hmm. Right, it's very nice up until it gets to that 50 mile an hour mark, and then it seems to be capped out right around there. That's where I would say, if it had a rev limiter, that's where the rev limiter would be going off. Now, Mode 3 is where we spent most of our time riding this bike, right?
Yeah, pretty much the whole time
if
we were doing anything special on it.
Mm-hmm. Right, even in the tight technical stuff, riding over logs, rocks, and especially in the sand, Mode 3 was pretty much where I would use this thing. It's power, it's a lot more aggressive off of the initial pull. Well, after that initial pull, it's still a smooth and linear power band. It's very similar to Map 2, but just a little bit more aggressive. It hits you a little bit harder. Mode 2 and Mode 3 is pretty much where I would be riding if I was doing really technical trails, like I was using Mode 2 and 3 when I was riding over logs. At first, the lack of a clutch, it did catch me off guard. I was trying to look for that clutch so I can kind of pop the wheel off the ground. And at first, I kind of saw this as a drawback. But the more time I spent on this, I actually found if you position the throttle just right, it's almost like the friction zone of a clutch. If you hold it at this throttle position, I was able to get the front wheel to pop up just like how I would want a gas-powered bike to do if I'm going over a rock or a log. So the more time you spend on this, the more you learn how to ride this bike and how to get it to do what you want to do. Is there anything you wanted to add to on the power?
Power was pretty smooth on all three maps.
Mm-hmm.
Really, always. Only downside of Power 1 is when it does cap off, it's capped.
Right.
Like you can't get any little bump or boost.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, all power was pretty good, pretty smooth.
Mm-hmm. It's a really versatile bike, and I think the modes cover different skill levels pretty well. Like a beginner, a novice, and an intermediate to expert rider. So for the ergonomics of this bike, there are some things that are quite a bit different. For instance, there's no brake pedal, there's no shift lever as well. And this is something that threw, I think, everyone for a loop the first time on this bike. I know for myself, when I was riding this with the KTM intro, when I was going down a hill, I went to do a downshift and go for the rear brake lever. But what ended up happening was my feet almost slipped off the pegs because there was nothing there. So the rear brake is activated by a lever on the handlebar where your clutch will normally be. The foot pegs are also a little further back, which is something that I didn't really notice until I went to turn this thing. This was something that the other testers immediately noticed though when they were riding it.
Yeah, I was finding same problems with the nothing to grab with your feet when you're going for the brake. So we were hopping on and off different bikes, and I would get used to the bike that I was on, and then when I would hop on the other bike, I would just go back to where the foot peg was on the other bike, and then there was no foot peg. So it was kind of a...
Or no lever?
No foot peg.
Oh, yeah.
So like it was just far enough forward to where, oh yeah, that's where it needs to be. That's where it is. It's not there. Oh, blew a foot off the side. And then, oh, it's not that far back anymore. So it was really weird. But
Right.
once you're used to it, you're pretty used to it.
Yeah, yeah. And for me, in a straight line, the rider triangle felt really good for me.
Yeah.
But when we talk about the handling, I did have to change change my body position for the turns a little bit. The handlebars are at a good height for me. Does feature the speedometer and odometer that you find on most KTM models. The brakes, they're not their typical Brembo brakes that you find on KTM, but they are disc brakes both front and rear, and I still found them to be really strong, really powerful.
They're really strong and powerful.
I was still able to lock up the front and rear wheel, which you don't want to lock up the front too much, but I just wanted to see. And then the tires are they're from Maxxis, they are a trials tire. They hook up really great. I don't think I ever got to spin out unless it was on a log or concrete. Even going up loose gravel, I was trying to get to spin out and very rarely was able to get to actually break traction. The seat height is about 35 inches tall. The headlight does have a high and low beams. It also offers a horn, which is really fun out on the trails if your buddies kind of forget you're there. So now onto the handling. So I felt like this bike, it has a fairly low center of gravity. I think it was around 240, 245 pounds, if I remember correctly. If I have that wrong, it's gonna pop up on the screen right now. But the lower center of gravity did lead to the bike feeling pretty planted in a straight line.
Yeah, it was pretty smooth. And
I don't remember getting any head shakes.
no, I
for the
didn't
most
get it
part.
a single time.
It was really nice. Even through the whoop, through like bumps and whoops, it was tracking really well. So when it does come to the turns, I will say this is where the backed up foot pegs do start to make a difference, at least for me. And this is where the rider triangle might start feeling a little bit weird to some people. Typically, I sit pretty far forward on the bike when I'm sitting down for a turn. When I was doing that on this bike, I was getting this diving sensation from the front end. Would you agree with that? Were you getting this?
Yeah, I was having trouble modulating the brakes while sitting down, like moving forward.
So I did find myself, once I sat a little further back than I was used to. Now I'm not saying back here, I would say versus where I normally sit around here. I was sitting a little further back here, more in the center of the seat, towards the center of the seat. And suddenly the bike felt a lot more planted in the turns for me. I was able to get it track really well. And I was kind of impressed with it. Even when we were riding the Supercross tracks out in the KTM intro, the thing in the turns, it was really nice, really fun. So now onto the suspension for this bike. So the Freeride does feature the WP Explorer forks and the Explorer PDS shock. What do you think about the suspension on this bike?
They did really well with how fast it goes and how it handles, which is kind of tough seeing how the electric motor compared to gas or petrol.
Yeah. So
it's tough. And they did a good job with it.
Yeah, I would say I do like the forks and the shock, how they handle with this bike. At first, I did think the forks were a little harsh on the initial part of the stroke. Playing around with the clickers, I've kind of gotten rid of some of this sensation. As we continue to test this, I can't wait to keep playing with these even more. But I'm pretty impressed with how much of the bumps it soaks up without really bottoming. You have to try pretty hard to bottom out the forks and the shock on this bike. And overall, it's the suspension, I'd say, is good on this.
Yeah, it's really good, and I like it. So.
Yeah. So for an entry-level bike, I think KTM did a good job. The different modes means you can grow with this bike pretty easily. It does give you all the things you would expect to find on a big bike. You know, the forks and the shock are really good. The brakes are really strong. I didn't have any problem with them. So this was our first electric bike experience, and yeah, I'd say it was pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah, it was fun and different and new.
We were getting about, it's kind of hard to judge because we weren't riding it consistently. We've been doing a lot of photos and videos with this bike, but I would say we've been getting anywhere between an hour to 2 hours of ride time with this, riding it in different modes and doing different trail situations like sand, gravel, and just hard packed trails. So as we continue to test this, we will try to get a better idea of how long you can get in which power mode and what situation. For the charge time, KTM says about an hour and 50 minutes or 110 minutes. And that's pretty much what we were getting for a charge time from near empty. I'd say about between 10 and 20% battery, back up to 100% battery. So yeah, I can't wait to put more time on this bike, find out more details regarding the ride time and trying to get more comfortable for all the riders.
Yeah.
So yeah, keep an eye on dirt bike test, and we'll see you out on the trails.